Mesopotamia, 2600 BC. The royal game of possibly a predecessor to backgammon, was played with pyramidal dice. And here I thought my D4 from my original D&D box set was old. Mesoamerican ball and hoop games, a forerunner to basketball, were held to be so important to that culture that they were frequently used as proxies for wars. Rather than hit their neighbors in the head with obsidian clubs, disputes were solved with a public sporting event whereupon the losing team was put to death. Experts agree, that's awesome. In 1886, Wilhelm Steinitz was crowned the first world chess champion, whereupon he knocked over his finals opponent, Johannes Zuckertort, and danced around the room. He was fined $500 and suspended for 3 weeks of competitive play for unsportsmanlike conduct. In 1954, Sid Meier was born in Detroit, Michigan. 1954 also brought us the Fender Stratocaster, Godzilla, and Brown v. Board of Education. It was generally considered to be among the most rocking of years. 2007 saw the cross-platform release of Rock Band. And I swear, if you people don't stop drumming maps on the table while I'm trying to run a meeting, there will be blood. Thousands of years of gaming history have brought us this far, but Game Center starts now. I'm Nick Davidson.
And I'm Mike Gills.
And this is Game Center. Tonight, we sit down with 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons designer James Wyatt and discuss some of the design philosophy that went into this historic update.
We bring you a retrospective on the history of randomizing elements in games, from modern technology to ancient sticks and seeds.
The Game Center team competes to ship the most barrels of coffee in our strategy breakdown. We tackle the classic Puerto Rico.
Dylan Mayo will need all the sheep he can get as he tackles Settlers of Catan.
But first, we join Junior Associate Intern Reporter Matt Murray on location with fans of Dungeons & Dragons to talk about their feelings on the new D&D.
Everyone could use more heroic fantasy adventure in their lives. And with a few of your friends and a little imagination, you can find it. Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition. Check it out at dndinsider.com. Get together, roll some dice, have fun.
A role-playing game is a game of collaborative fiction, strategy, and storytelling. Players develop their fictional personas in narrative as well as numeric terms.
Speaking of Nick, let me tell you about my character. You see, he's a dragonborn paladin with a wooden head.
A good role-playing game will yield fascinating stories, unique epics that can rival the best written works of fiction.
He was moving along through the forest, and it was the forest of hidden prosthetic pieces.
However, one finds that these stories often lose something in the retelling, and that outside of an individual's gaming group,
anymore because the horse couldn't carry him.
One might find these tales of glory somewhat annoying.
So he was able to find the beavers. The beavers were able to help.
We send Matt Murray out into the desolate lands of local hobbydom to interview RPG fans on their thoughts about the upcoming release of D&D 4th edition. Over to you, Matt, right now.
This is Matthew Murray, and we're here in Seattle, Washington at Gary's Games, where we're going to talk with some people about the upcoming release of Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition. Let's go inside and speak with the people, including some girls. Come on. We're here with Charlie, and we're going to be asking him some questions about D&D's 4th edition. Charlie, how utterly fantastic do you think 4th edition is going to be?
I think it's a hack job rush that you guys are cranking out to try to make more money.
It's really annoying because all the guys are drooling all over it and they're obsessed with it. It's really stupid.
You don't enjoy their obsession with 4th edition Dungeons & Dragons?
I would prefer if they were obsessed with me. I mean, I am a female gamer. That's why I'm here.
This is true.
It's gonna be 4 times the Satan's game. I can't even take it anymore.
Wow. Allie, what's one of your favorite recollections of Dungeons and Dragons?
That would be when I got to run the adventure that came with the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon show boxed set. It was a little bit of a load of garbage, but pretty fun.
It's been years since I've been gaming, but I remember back in my Dragon Raid years, the feel of a good D16.
I came to the store here looking for playing a game like Dungeons and Dragons, and they actually introduced me to some other games that they thought were better.
Other Wizards games?
No.
Did they have wizards in them?
Yeah, I suppose so.
Layla loves Wizards games.
I haven't played Dungeons and Dragons since first edition.
What's your favorite new class?
Gnome Assassin.
You have a personal favorite weapon?
I generally like to take my roommate's bag of gaming books and swing them over my head and use them as a bludgeoning weapon.
If you were a monster, what monster would you be?
I'd be the Delver.
I don't know what that means.
You introduced it in third and hyped everyone up about it in All the Dragons from 1999 and then cut it.
Well, I was really excited about it, and then I found out they're kicking out my favorite monster, the Odiug, and I think that's a lot of
Odios eat poo.
I think my favorite rule has got to be spells per day, because nothing really captures magic like only being able to cast a very specific number of spells that are erased magically from your memory after you complete them.
And now for a critical look at some of the hallowed pantheon of gaming greats, Dylan Mayo's editorial segment, Why Your Favorite Game Sucks. It is important to note that the following opinions are solely those of Dylan Mayo, and not representative of those of Game Center, Wizards of the Coast, Hasbro, any entity even vaguely affiliated with Wizards or Hasbro, or, in fact, any rational human being. If you ask me, he's a menace to all living things, and must be stopped before he destroys us all. Dylan?
Hello gamers, I'm Dylan Exobyte Mayo, and your favorite game sucks. I'll be applying a critical eye to show where the famous and the hyped are flawed, as well as try to bring up some of their lesser known triumphs. Tonight, your favorite game is Settlers of Catan. For most American board gamers, this is the game that started the German invasion. Concepts like victory points, no player elimination, and the random board debuted for those of us outside of Europe. Now, a new generation is seeing it, on Xbox Live Arcade and in other online incarnations. It really isn't that hard to learn, although an all-noob game can be a bit painful. Its strategy basically comes down to probability management, balancing scarce resources versus diversification of production numbers. Since in this game, production begets production, it's quite often that by halfway through the game, at least one player has little or no chance to win. Certain board setups are virtual turn zero losses for whoever places first. And these lead to Catan's greatest sin, king-making. Oh, they may say there's no player elimination, but when your 2 settlements and 3 roads are surrounded by opposing colors, and your next possible expansion is the lucrative Sheepport Water Desert Vertex, you're not going to be settling much at all. You have lost the game at this point. But you can't even quit, so you get to sit there being miserable and trade with everyone else. So, either your best friend gets nafted while that jerk playing yellow gets holly smooted, or you don't trade at all, and the economy slows down to Oomga drone speeds. The problem is, Settlers nearly always comes down to someone trading 3 ore and a wheat for a sheep IOU, just to get the damn game over. Or, even better, everybody is contending in the late game, and at the end, no one trades a thing. The game reduces to rolling, collecting, rolling, robbering, rolling, until finally somebody hits 777s and wins the jackpot of the governorship. Now, I must hate this game, right? Well, I'm not too keen on just the base set, or remedial settlers. But when you add in the expansion... No, the other expansion! Cities and Knights, suddenly you have enough paths to victory. Each of these are interdependent of each other, and use different axes of luck. Suddenly, not only are there a variety of strategies, but you can use reasonable hybrids or switch. especially with the rebalancing of the game seen in the Collector's Edition. Here's my copy. Along with the normal base and Cities and Knights, the game is pretty decent with 4 players. While not my first choice for game night, if it weren't for old Catan here, we might never have seen our Puerto Ricos, our Calyses, our Carcassones, or any of our other German board games that we love so much. Of course, we'd put up with way less windless purgatories as well. I'm Dylan Exobyte Mayo, and I've got wood for sheep. How about a wood and an oar? Oh, thank you.
Game Center brings you in-depth interviews with the industry leaders inside Wizards, asking the questions that might get missed by other media. For his thoughts on the philosophy of design, we go now to James Wyatt in our studio. I'm Nick Davidson, joined here by James Wyatt, lead story designer for Dungeons & Dragons and one of the lead designers on the 4th edition project. James, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
James, just to start us off, tell us a little bit about your history here at Wizards and your work on the 4th edition project.
Well, I started working at Wizards in January of 2000, so I've been here a little over 8 years. And 3 years ago now, I was part of the team that Bill Slavacek, who's the director of role-playing R&D, put together to start working on 4th edition.
4th edition represents some fairly major changes from 3rd, just in terms of game mechanics, but also game philosophy. What were some of the fundamental principles of 4th edition design?
I think there are 2 big ones. This time around, we are leaning more towards what's fun for the game and less towards making sure that the rules represent a simulation of the fantasy reality of the D&D world. So then the other big principle is the idea of exceptions-based design. D&D has, again, always kind of been exceptions-based, but we really made an effort this time through to take the core rules of the game, streamline them, make them as straightforward as possible. Again, empowering the DM to make decisions about how to apply them, but then all the interesting parts of the rules live in the exceptions, which are character powers, oh, and other things like feats and magic items. But character powers are the real meat or high protein content for vegetarians of the system.
Some of the changes that you see in 4th edition are things that haven't changed since 1st edition, like the alignment system or the function of a beholder's central eye stalk. Now, what goes into a decision like that? How do you balance the power of continuity and tradition versus the opportunity to improve upon a design?
No cows were sacred anymore. 3rd edition had a philosophy of maintaining some of the sacred cows of the game. Magic Missile should do 1d4 plus 1 damage. Ability scores are 3 to 18. A lot of these things ended up still being in the game, but in places where the sacred cows got in the way of the fun of the game, we slaughtered them mercilessly. So alignment is one of those. It's not a huge barrier to the game, but the complexity of the 9 alignment structure is something that is a barrier to a lot of people. It's a really subtle philosophical distinction that does not have a lot of important impact in the game. The Beholder actually is a really interesting example as well, because that is a monster that was designed to deal with another imbalance in the game, which is at higher levels, wizards are awesomely powerful characters, way out overshadowing fighters and non-spellcasting classes. So the Beholder's got an anti-magic ray to shut the wizard down, primarily. Also shuts down the cleric. In the 4th edition environment, where all characters are balanced with each other and they're all using interesting powers, what's really important about the Beholder and its central eye is that it's putting a damper on your actions, regardless of whether you're using something called magic or not.
So just to clarify, in 3.5, if you have an average party of 6 15th level characters with a few spells up each, and a beholder opens their central eye, how long should I expect the math to take when we recalculate all of our combat numbers?
It depends on the players, but if you're not prepared for that, easily 10 or 15 minutes at the table. Coming to a halt, we're now, okay, one target is dazed, and that just means he's doing less on his turn. So yes, there's absolutely a gameplay issue in that as well.
There are also some major race and class changes from 3rd edition to 4th edition, mainly the gnome being moved off to the monsters manual to be added later. I believe there are now roughly 30 types of elves in the player's handbook. Tieflings elevated from a tier 2 race into the player's handbook and given prominence of their own. And Dragonborn, a reptilian race out of nowhere. I guess the question I'm really trying to ask is that Dragonborn being hatched from eggs and therefore reptiles, why do they have breasts?
So I have two answers to that question. The first is to point out that your question is actually a fallacy. To apply the scientific category of reptile to something in the D&D world is actually ludicrous. A dragon looks like a real-world reptile in some ways, but it's not a reptile, it's warm-blooded. Yes, it lays eggs, and dragons, as far as I know, don't nurse their young. Hippogriffs, are they mammals or birds? It's not at all clear.
They're mammal birds.
Dragonborn are scaly and lay eggs. That doesn't make them reptiles. And evidently they nurse their young. I think it's unlikely that we're going to publish a book that goes into the life cycle and child rearing practices of Dragonborn in any depth. There is another reason, though, a little bit more serious, which is that anytime we try to create a new race for the game, we really are walking a balance between creating something that's cool and interesting and a little bit alien, and something that people can identify with. And frankly, female Dragonborn are going to get a lot more play if they're recognizably female. If you look at that character and say, yes, I know that that's a woman, and that's a woman that I want to be in the game. Maybe not me personally.
Now, if you were to go back 5 years and ask a role-playing game player how they got started with RPGs, they'd probably tell you that it was Dungeons & Dragons or something like one of the old gold box games. Now, you've got an explosion of online RPGs, digital RPGs, and somebody's much more likely to say that they got their start with Asheron's Call, Lord of the Rings Online, or a lesser-known MMO like World of Warcraft, for example. Does this influence the design and development of Dungeons & Dragons?
This is actually a significant change and a really positive one for us, that you take any 8-year-old now, and he will have an understanding of playing a character and leveling up and what hit points are by virtue of having played Pokemon, right? In writing the introduction to the 4th edition Player's Handbook, I felt like there was a lot that we've always felt like we had to kind of hold your hand and walk you through explaining that now people get by virtue of the popularity of this whole range of games. The way I like to think about them is as if they're holding up a mirror to us, that frankly they've stolen a lot from D&D because most of the designers and developers of those games have backgrounds in playing D&D as well. So when I sit down and play some obscure game like World of Warcraft, which I've done from time to time, I see D&D through the lens of the people who designed and developed that game for that particular environment. It's doing many things that D&D has always done, and doing them in different ways because the environment is different and the audience is different. And so I feel like we can learn from that without fundamentally changing what D&D is.
So James, I just want to thank you very much for joining us for this. This has been educational and helpful for all of us.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure.
We look at board games for our first strategy breakdown.
Game Center Strategy Breakdown.
Today we take on Puerto Rico, a German-style strategy game published by Rio Grande Games that has players assuming the roles of colonial governors on the island of Puerto Rico during the age of Caribbean ascendancy. The aim of this game is to amass the most victory points by shipping goods to the old world and by constructing buildings. And just like the infamous helmet catch of the 2008 Super Bowl, there is a key play that takes place late in the game that irrevocably alters its results to my own personal detriment. Let the games begin.
From the unpredictable bounce of a football to the beloved D20 to computerized random number generators, games are defined in part by the degree to which outcomes are randomized, While skill-only games like chess or Caylus certainly have great staying power, the majority of games are influenced, and in many cases defined, by their use of randomizing elements.
Today, we embark on a serious, in-depth study of the history of randomizers, from ancient dice and two-sided acorns, to the Pop-O-Matic bubble and the ever-popular deck of playing cards.
Mike, it says here we're doing a music video.
Yeah!
You just said this was a serious, in-depth study of the history of randomizers.
Yeah!
And we're gonna do a Billy Joel song.
Yeah.
All right, sure, whatever, just go for it.
Ladies and gentlemen, the history of randomizers.
First the royal game of knucklebones upon the floor, then the game of Senet, 5 binary stick set. You can only race around, toss 4 sticks on the ground. Indians played either T-flat one side round underneath. You chose used acorn, shock toss 8 grains of corn, or stick dice red and green. Pot only used kidney bean, cowrie shell, pot cheesy, nickel nuts in what green. Paso used crow's claws, guess who drew the short straw? The history of randomizers. The main game components that you'll need to own it. A plethora of randomizers. When the roll goes done, the game has begun. Astrados from finger bones, Chaomorphs are also thrown. Chancellor 1 potato, eeny meeny miny mo. 2 coins toss, 2, a flip 1 coin or pip. Left heads or tail, cross and tie. Keep on flipping, play a while. Arkham Horror uses chips, tiles are placed. You, bit in zombies you flip over tiles. These packs are used, in silver eye, polished stones win. Tip, in Shogun you use magnets, spin the dial. Or king oil in, risk 20 to 10. It's a selfie of randomizers. Choose your path, spin the dial, you'll be playing leave a while. A plethora of randomizers. When the roll goes done, the game has begun. The game of life has its spinning ghost coin to the winner. Trouble has a Pop-O-Matic shocking roulette, coffee static, D&D law, custom dice, roll a 6 to catch the mice, hives and dice, or dungeon crawl, which has whammy ball. Quintagon Determinizer, Antlers Custom Randomizer, Incognitos, Any Tickle, Intufels Cooch has the Devil, Ranhunt Sweater, Line Computer, History Big, Door of Suitors, Head of Dice, a Dragon Bow, for Legions of the Pedal Throne, a variety of randomizers. The act of changes, or game cash exchanges, a plethora of randomizers. When the roll goes done, the game has begun. Random card ACGs. Magic was the first release. Belisara, Yu-Gi-Oh! Pez the card game. Naruto, Red Zone Raid, Digimon, Warlord, Football Champions, Vitas for the hardcore. The playing card came out before. Whipsaw Euchre, Blackjack Cribbage, Angus Spitz, a Rummy Garbage, Old Matrius, Rumkert, Python, Hearts, Red Dog, Laugh, and Liba, Duplex of randomizers. The games, The Alter, Roll a 1, and Falter, a plethora of randomizers. When the roll goes done, the game has begun. It's the history of randomizers. The main game components that you'll need to own it. A plethora of randomizers. When the roll goes done, the game has begun. It's the history of randomizers. The main game components that you'll need to own it. A plethora of randomizers. When the roll goes done, the game has begun.
That was awesome!
I can't believe we did that. Ladies and gentlemen, from our studios here in Renton, this has been Game Center. Thank you and good night.
Go Patriots.
That was terrible. We're never going to win.